and being like, calories be damned. My breath is minty. I feel great for now. I realized now I needed that bolt of sugar high in a way, like kind of self-medicating, even though it's just sugar, but we can go on another podcast or drinks over that. But like, yeah, it's like I had to do what I had to do to make me feel happy enough to, throw on some tights and a dress and get on that bus. I'm telling you. So.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the great fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. The Everything Band podcast is a proud member of the Music Teachers Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening. I really appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you know one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help your students live up to the best that is in them through music. And now, on to my next guest, composer Jennifer Jolley. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate your time. Jennifer, can you introduce yourself for my listeners who may not know your name?
Sure. Well, I'm Jennifer Jolley, and I'm a composer. Right now, I'm an assistant professor of composition at Texas Tech University, and I've been here for 1 1/3 semesters. So I am new to Texas, and I'm new to Lubbock. I am originally from Los Angeles, California. So, and there was a time in my life where I lived in Vermont, and I also lived in Cincinnati. My undergraduate was at the University of Southern California, and I had various teachers there, and I did my graduate work at the College Conservatory of Music in Cincinnati. So that explains all of my places where I lived except for Vermont, but that was after college. So,
I won't ask, but Vermont's a nice place.
Oh, it is. It's lovely. I miss it probably. Well, this time of year, it's still pretty with the snow, but they don't have a spring. They will, beg to differ on that one, but not really one to like cold. And I have to admit, today in the Texas Panhandle, and I am using air quotes because if any Texan out there can explain to me why I'm living in the Panhandle, that would be most appreciative. But it is in the low 30s, and I don't like it, but that's okay.
So, can you tell me about your current gig at Texas Tech and what that's like?
Yes. So my job here, I was more or less charged with creating the computer music studios and teaching computer music classes, which I think is great because probably I'm a child of the 80s. And in fact, my first exposure to classical music was through Wendy Carlos's Switched on Bach album. And so I get to do that. I get to be creative. As a graduate student, I did more computer music than what I've been doing lately, which has been more acoustic stuff, lots of band stuff, which has been great. So right now I'm thinking of ways to kind of combine the two. Like I was talking to my colleague here, Sarah McCoyne, and we're thinking about a project in the next 2 or 3 years. And we're like, let's make it really cool and special, within the frameworks of, what we have available. What's our resources? Like, I don't know if we'll do like some kind of video art. I don't know if it'll just be straight electronics, but I think it's going to be really fun to experiment and do those things here.
Yeah. I mean, this whole idea of combining electronics with band is something that seems to be growing in popularity. I had Alex Shapiro on the show last spring, and Alex, of course, has her pieces that are like paper cut and rock music that use electronics, and I had Stephen Bryant on. So it's something that we need to see more of, I think, for sure.
I agree. And to even make it user-friendly, I think part of the trepidation in using electronics is, something might like crap out on you with the speakers or whatnot. But I think there is absolutely a way to make it user-friendly. And also part of my thesis in teaching these classes is to have performers and creators involved. It doesn't have to be with just composers. It's like we can open it up to other people and like have them use Ableton Live in conjunction with Max and just make it like, don't be scared of this. This is really cool and you can do great things with it.
Yeah, I think there are plenty of directors out there who are interested in this. I know from my perspective is that in the classroom or setting up a concert, there's so much logistics for a high school teacher, a middle school teacher. And money is such an issue at a lot of places that, boy, what if we don't have that equipment? What can you do as a composer to help that band director with electronics?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm hoping that there's speakers involved and it kind of needs to run itself. I think actually the advantage of electronics and music at the middle school level especially is that it kind of supplements their ability to play. I've written three. I've written like 3 pedagogical pieces. And one of the challenges that I think composers freak out about is how limiting it is. And as a former pianist, sometimes I'm like, I don't do terribly complex rhythms. This is awesome. I have to write in 4/4. I have an excuse to not write super cool music, even though I try to make it as cool as possible. At the same time, the Stephen Bryant piece, which I'm forgetting off the top of my head, where it's a grade 2 level.
The Machine Awakes?
Yes, it sounds so cool. And from what I hear, kids love playing it because they sound great with it. You know what I mean? So it's just as long as there's some speakers, I would hope that the schools would have speakers. If not, we can probably figure something out. But, I wouldn't do anything live, of course, but just make it really user-friendly and really, adaptable to middle school directors who, man, bless them. They're awesome people on this planet for like teaching the kids, and hearing them develop as musicians and running the show, like try to make their job as easy as possible.
Yeah. So I'm really fascinated by this comment you made about supplementing the ability of the students to play more difficult music. And I think that's really the name of the game with music for middle school.
But also teaching them. Yes, exactly. And I think that's the challenge. And then also, from the composer standpoint, trying to give them music that's satisfying for them. I've been saying to a few people, like, I've received some comments over the past couple of years, like, thank you so much for writing your pedagogical pieces. This is actually good music. And I was like, well, these children are people too. I want them to have good music. And I'd also like to write good music and trying to figure out that balance of like, okay, here's the level they play at and they want to sound good. I think every single musician you ask, they never want to sound bad. And I think that applies to kids also. But just trying to find that balance of writing like a cool concept or a cool idea at the same time, having them sound good, also at the same time, teaching them some concepts so they are challenged a little bit. And if you think about it, I think any musician wants that. They want to sound good, they want a little bit of a challenge, and they want it enjoyable to play.
So can you tell me about your origin story? So you mentioned that you play piano. Can you tell me about how you got started in music? And I know that you also mentioned briefly before I started recording that you may have some band experience in there.
Yes, that is coming out. So as a child, I want to say when I was like 4 or 5, let's say 5, I'm not that precocious. I was very interested in the piano, that someone could sit down and play all the notes all at once. And I remember as a 5-year-old, like being at some kind of, social hang. I think it was like a couple of families getting together at the house and they had a piano. And I'm like, I'm going to play this tune. I'm going to do it. And I sat down and I pressed like a C and a G because it was like outside, that lock that upright pianos have. And I was like, whoa, this is not right. This is not okay. But I would always be fascinated with the piano and watch somebody play the piano. So my parents got like a cheap upright and got me like the local neighborhood lady to teach me piano lessons. And so that was kind of my musical background. Also, my mom's Korean, so I think that was a thing. It's like you're learning piano. So fortunately, I happened to be very fascinated by the instrument. Now, I also learned quickly as a child that practicing sucked. And I would find myself, in hindsight, improvising. I didn't know that that was composing. I would just always add notes. My mom, bless her, who means the best for me and still does, was like, "You're fake practicing piano, Jen." And I'm like, fine, but anyways, so that was kind of my background. But I also liked instruments. There was like, I played violin for a hot second, but then as a six-year-old, I did the math of like, wait, if I have to practice 30 minutes of piano and 30 minutes of violin, that's an hour of practicing. No, thank you. And I kind of regret that. But then when I was in middle school, I got to start beginning band, which is great. And I was like, all right, I'm going to pick the hardest instrument, and that's the horn. So I remember taking home a horn. It probably wasn't too crusty, hopefully. But I didn't understand the concept of concert pitch and transpose pitch. So I remember as a child trying to play middle C, but the C for the horn is like the F below. And then I found out about transposition. I'm like, that's dumb. It's not. And I've had to explain this to Interlochen students, to string players who are like, we don't understand. I'm like, just accept it. It's physics. But anyway, so I switched to the flute.
Sorry.
I know. I was like, I look back and I'm like, I probably was a difficult child. Like sometimes like I look at my mom and like what she had to put up with me. Like I was born the way I was. I was like, that's stupid. Like it's not logical. I don't understand. And if somebody would have been like, it's the length of the tube and you don't have to like it. And I'd be like, okay. And then I'd probably switch to flute anyway. So I spent my middle school years playing flute. And I still remember the fingerings and the ranges. And fortunately, my band director at the time realized that I was like super bored in beginning band and let me be in advanced band like the second semester and let me play flute in the more advanced middle school thing. But yeah, that was me, middle school flute player.
How long did you play flute?
Okay, so I played flute since I was sixth grade to my freshman year in high school. I was with the Downey High School marching band. So we did marching band for one semester and then concert band the next semester. So I actually had an experience in marching band and concert band. And then after I transferred to a performing arts high school in Orange County and focused more on piano and then eventually composing. So that's when my flute career ended. Not that I really had one, but that's my background.
All right. So can you tell me about, I guess what I want to make the connection to is I want to talk a little bit about your early composition career and then when you started to get involved writing for band and that journey. And so you want to talk about your early composition training and your early studies?
Sure. Yeah. So when I was a freshman at USC, I remembered a few things that my first composition teacher taught me. And one of the things was you needed to go to every single band concert and every single percussion concert because chances are you're going to have new music on those concerts. So my freshman year, I went to every single band concert. And at the time, I didn't know who Robert Reynolds was, but he happened to get hired around that time, taken out of retirement. I know I look back and I was like, I saw a few of his shows, but I didn't know who he was because I was a freshman and I studied piano and I was only in marching band for a hot second and concert band for a hot second. So, but I was told I went to every single percussion show. And, I think the best thing I did for myself went to all these concerts and heard a whole bunch of music. And I really enjoyed the band music. I noticed it had a different repertoire than orchestra, which had a different repertoire from like percussion ensemble and the music ensemble, which you had at USC. So that was, I would say, my more intense exposure to band, but I've never played collegiately in a concert band. But anyway, and also my junior year, Frank Kelly he still is teaching at USC. And again, because I don't think I played a Frank Kelly piece that hot second when I was in high school concert band, or maybe I wasn't observant. Like I definitely played like a James Swearingen, that I remember. But so I was just clueless until I had some friends who were like, oh my goodness, like Frank Kelly writes like a bunch of band music. And it's not like he would hide it. He just saw it as like two different hats of like concert music and band music, which I think one thing I like about writing band music is like that line is dividing. But that was something that, he talked about. And so I got to stay with Frank DeKelly. Like, I heard a few of his band pieces while I was in school. I heard his orchestral version of Blue Shades. It was performed in Orange County. So I would say that I had a slower introduction to band music. It is probably not as traditional as like being in a wind ensemble and growing up with it, but just kind of hearing it more as an observer and hearing how they are just great proponents of new music and had fun and interesting concerts to go to. So I would say it wasn't until I was in grad school, when I was at CCM and I went to all the band concerts, and then I started to like kind of inch my way in. Terrence Milligan teaches at CCM, or he did. I think he got brought back from retirement. He's still there, I think. He's lovely. He taught like a wind conducting class, which is meant for doctoral students if they had a wind conducting cognate. And I asked if I could crash the class, and I did. So I went through all those standards, and I got to wave my baton like for 2 class periods. It's not meant to be like a lab where you conduct the ensemble, but got to know Rodney went there really well too, and I got to work a lot with CCM. So it wasn't until I was in graduate school where I wrote my first band piece.
So what was that first piece you wrote?
The first piece is called Motordome. One of my graduate school friends, Matt Westgate, I believe he teaches at Amherst College now, was at the time teaching at Xavier University, which is like a small college in Cincinnati, Ohio. And he had an amateur band. I think the term would be like third level band or something like that. And he's like, I really like your music. I really like how you've written for winds in the past. I would love for you to write a piece. And I was like, finally. Well, I didn't say finally, but I was really excited. I was like, I've been wanting to write a band piece for years. I just didn't know how to like approach it, and this was really great of Matt. So at the same time, since this is my first band piece and I've been exposed to all this band music, and usually the first thing that a non-wind band composer would think of is like, what do I do with all this color? And so I was like, well, what would be an equivalent of big, bold, bright color? And I was thinking of neon lights. So I went to the art school library. We have DAP at the University of Cincinnati. And I just started researching neon, like history of neon sculpture and neon lights. And I ran into this artist called Keith Saunier, who made this public art piece in front of the Caltrans building in Los Angeles. And that's called Motordome. And I was like, that's a really cool idea of taking these red and blue neon lights, kind of representative of traffic in Los Angeles. And just, you think of cars going around corners and whatnot. And I was like, that's a piece I could model my first band piece off of. Since we have big, bold, bright statements, I'm from Los Angeles. It's a public art thing. And so that's what the piece is about. So I have these like linear lines, and I think I did pretty well. I did okay.
How was that received? Because I don't see another piece for a few more years.
You know what? I thought it was received okay. To be honest, the piece was harder than I thought it was. What makes the piece difficult is it has some exposed moments, and I realized that like ups your level really quickly. But I kind of thought of it as like I wanted to write a minimalist piece. I did make sure they were able to breathe. So I thought the audience reception was good, but yes, it didn't really take off. And I wondered if that was something on my end, like maybe I needed to market it more, or maybe like let other band directors know. But the thing is like, I didn't really know too many band directors, and I'm not one to cold call somebody or like walk up to a stranger in a bar unless like I have a way in. Like, I'm just not that person. So yeah, it had been a few years. And then I got a couple of commissions for some chamber works in the interim. And, I had to do this thing like graduate, and whatnot.
So your next one I see, and now correct me if I'm wrong, it looks like it's Through the Looking Glass. Oh, Through the Looking Glass.
Yes.
Falls.
Falls, yes.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
How did that one come about?
I Okay. So one thing that my friend Rob Deemer did for me, and I didn't personally know Rob Deemer at the time, but in about 2012, I was asked to do a visit to SUNY Fredonia as like one of their Ethos New Music guest composers. And that before I came, he was consistently writing articles on New Music Box, and he profiled my fail blog. So and I wasn't expecting it. He's like, I can't wait to meet her. She seems down to earth. And it's great that she, highlights her failures, quote unquote, her rejection letters. And I'm thinking like, dude, that was my therapy in grad school. Like I didn't get health insurance. This is before Obamacare, right? So the long story short is there was a conductor at, where was it? Brevard College, Miller Aspel. And he was reading this article and he's looking at my website and he's like, I would love to work with you because there's like a stereotypical sound in band music. And he's like, I think band music can be other things. He's like, and I think you are the composer that could do it. And then he was also brainstorming of like, how do we integrate it with various projects? But ultimately, he's like, how cool would it be if you worked with the local fifth graders and wrote a piece with them? And at first I was like, okay, that's a lot of moving parts, but there's probably a way to do this. And so I looked to my friend Danny Clay, who I went to CCM with him, and he's in the San Francisco area, and he's been doing a lot of outreach with children. And specifically what he was doing at the time was having them do graphic score responses to traditional pieces of music. And then he had one of the Beethoven string quartets, had them listen to a piece of it and said, here's a tiny piece of scrap paper, write something. And there's this really cute video of where this other string quartet then improvised these graphic scores. And I'm like, that's what I can do with these kids. I can say, hey, you guys have these waterfalls in Brevard, and let me have you listen to a piece about water. And then you write your response to it, and I'll turn it into a wind ensemble piece. So that's how that came about.
Yeah, I was looking at the score, and my first reaction when you said fifth graders is, this is not a piece for fifth graders. And then the second thing I noticed as you were talking is that each little section has a name, and so that makes perfect sense now. That's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, thank you. And it worked out pretty well. And if it's performed, then it will, hopefully their old artwork will pop up. And goodness, like, how long ago was this piece? Because now I'm thinking these kids are no longer kids. Yeah. And actually one of the kids moved away. So I think one movement is Jasper, and the teacher's like, oh, he moved. And I'm like, oh, well, he's getting a reinterpretation of this piece. And Miller was great. Like the whole concert, they invited the students over and they had little name tags. And I remember talking to the mother of the child whose piece bookends the piece. And I think the woman was really flattered. She's like, thank you for like really liking my daughter's piece. I'm thinking like musically it worked out well, kind of did like a pictures at an exhibition type of thing, but it was so much fun. And like the kids felt special, and they got to see their drawings on, projected, and they got to hear the musical interpretation of their musical interpretation of something else. And that worked out really well.
That's really cool. That's a great idea. So after this piece, Through the Looking Glass Falls, I noticed that there's one more piece in 2016 and then 6 band pieces in 2017 and 2018. So you went from 2 and 5 years to 7 and 3 years. So what happened?
I think that, remind me, what was the next piece? Was it my Last Stage to Red Rock?
Last Stage to Red Rock, yep.
Yeah, so again, another Rob Deemer connection. Micah Ewing, who is in charge of the middle school band program at Mason Middle School in Mason, Ohio, which is outside of Cincinnati, was looking to commission a new grade 1 band work from 3 composers over 3 years. So I think Clint Needham was one. I don't know if he was the first one or if Rob Deemer was, but I remember Rob Deemer was having a performance of it. He's like, Jen, you live in Cincinnati. He's like, I'd love to see you. I'm like, yep, let's do it. So I remember like driving through torrential rainstorm and going to a middle school band concert and hearing his like grade 1 piece. And I thought that was really cool. And I got to meet Micah, who's been awesome and super supportive. And I think that he was thinking about programming my music or, having me as part of this commissioning project to help with the grade 1 repertoire. And so that's how I got that gig. And it was great because then I got to like visit the students, and I was teaching in Delaware, Ohio, I think by that time, where they were able to have me on for this project. And so I could like drive down and, I can, figure some stuff out, but just really talk to the kids and see what their playing level was, which was super helpful. And they gave me a guideline and they said, and here's some stuff we're thinking about that'll be programmed around your piece, and really interacting with the kids. And I remember like asking them like, well, what do you like playing? What are you interested in? And they're like, oh, we like having the melody and then passing it on. And then, I was trying to get some ideas, but it was more like not a full-on workshop, but just really getting to know the ensemble, which was fantastic. And that's what gives me life as a composer, honestly, is just being able to work with people, with other musicians, and to create music together. So I think once that started happening, that helped a little bit. And then I got the great fortune of like being on Jerry Junkin's radar, which I think is another story in itself. But yeah.
So, well, let's tell that story. How did you end up on Jerry Junkin's radar?
Yeah. So also another Rob Deemer connection. I think a few years later was able to get the job as an instructor of composition at Interlochen Arts Camp. I'm going to be there again this summer. And basically my job there is to teach high school students composition, maybe some other like side classes and whatnot. But it was a fun gig. It's an intense gig, but it's great because I kind of see it as like a big musical conference where I have amazing colleagues there and, working with really talented kids. And so, I just did my job and actually went to as many wind ensemble concerts as possible. That old habit is going to die hard, but no regrets there. So one of the guest conductors for the wind band program was Jerry Junkin. And I remember, I think I was like working a couple summers at Interlochen, and then I get this Facebook message and it's from Jerry Junkin. And he's like, hi, sorry to contact you on Facebook, but I don't have your email or contact, but I'd like to call you next couple days. And I'm like, what's happening? I just met him in passing, like my first year. Like I had dinner with him. John Mackey was like the guest composer that year, like for the band. So I had dinner with Jerry Junkin, but like I was like, all right, I didn't spill anything on myself. We're cool. I didn't say anything stupid. We're cool, right? Like no big deal. So this came out of the blue, and I'm like, okay, don't mess this up. And I was able to talk to him on the phone, and he said that the organization Kappa Psi wanted to commission a composer, but oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I'm asking you at the last minute. You have less than a year to write this. Would you be okay with this? And I'm thinking like, play it cool, Jen. Play it cool. This is amazing. So yes, I said yes to the gig, and that's how my piece, The Eyes of the World Are Upon You, came about. But he would tell people, like I was trying to figure out who referred me to Jerry Junkin. Like I remember I talked to a couple friends. I'm like, thanks for putting my name forward. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, no, thanks. But I think it is through the Interlochen connection, because Jerry's like, oh, I've known Jennifer for years. We're colleagues at Interlochen. I'm like, yes, 2 years is plural. That is years. Yes, that's awesome. So and then they took it to CBDNA National a couple years ago. So
yeah, this is an extraordinary piece. I listened to this last night. I had listened to it before.
Oh, thank you.
But can you tell people a little bit more about this particular work, The Eyes of the World Are Upon You?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's a piece that I didn't think I'd be writing, to be honest. When I was first approached to write a piece for UT, I was like, all right, let me think of the students, because I'm writing for them. I was like, awesome. I get to do some like chambery soloistic passages because they can handle it. That's great. I'm a great conductor, great ensemble. I knew I was reading it for Kappa Kappa Psi, and I was like, all right, what would honor them? Is it fun? Is it about Texas? Like, nothing was really sticking, but I was just like, hitting the ground running, brainstorming this ideas because I only had a few months. So I did not expect to write like a social justice or anything serious. But at the time, that summer, I was reading these New York Times articles about how the same day the tower shooting happened, the 50th anniversary of that day, they're going to allow open carry. And as a professor person, I was like, I have feelings about that because, I would like to teach in a safe space. Also, what does open carry mean? What could happen? How does this change things? How does this affect my safety? How does it affect student safety? I was also reading some reports of how like certain colorful UT Austin protests of this. So those of you guys listening, you can look that up later. So I didn't think I'd be writing a piece about this, but I couldn't stop thinking about this. And I felt like, when I write music, I usually want to say something with my music or create an emotion. And I think that's why I do what I do as a composer, So I remember talking to Scott Hanna and saying like, hey, I have an idea for a piece, but I really don't know if it's too controversial, if it's not appropriate, because I'm not a Texan. I'm not a UT Austin grad. Like, who am I to write a piece about the tower shooting that happened 50 years ago? But this is what I'm thinking about. And I said, if you don't think it's a good idea, like ask some people, like I will come up with something else. And he's like, I will get back to you. And thanks for asking. And he came back and he said, we love the idea. And then I brainstormed the piece with him. I went from a place of, let's say, anger as a professor and as a human and not understanding like the Texan culture, which is something I'm very much experiencing now and in a good way. It's fine. But, just coming from a place of honor and respect and kind of like lifting up the victims, but also celebrating the bravery that day. So that being said, with the piece in general, it's somewhat programmatic, but not completely. But I think of like the 17 victims, and I have like 17 voice counterpoint, which while I was writing the piece, I was like, this 17 voice counterpoint will last for 3 minutes. No, that's really difficult to write. Like that just will not happen. So, but just like figuring out a tune, I quote indirectly spiritual, how can we keep from singing, in that we're respecting these people. Like they are definitely part of Texas culture. Because this is a big moment in their history. And, I remember talking to Omar Thomas about this because I was like, who am I? I said, if this makes any sense, I was not expecting to write a piece like this. And who am I, like, to write this piece? Again, not from Texas, not a UT grad. Like, I'm coming out of it from like an outsider's perspective. And yet it was just probably the moment to write it. And so I'm grateful for that.
So, Jennifer, a couple things jump out at me. One, I think the first time I knew your name must be, 2012, and it was through that New Music Box article and the Fail blog. Can you tell my listeners, because I think it's really a good lesson about the Fail blog and what that actually is?
Sure. I want to say 2008, maybe 2009. I've probably been doing this blog for 10 years, although it's sporadic now because I have a day job. But when I was 29 years old, I was a graduate student, and usually 30 is when you're no longer a quote unquote young composer. So, that's a whole other like podcast topic in itself. But the long story short was like, this is the last year I could apply for certain competitions. So I was like, you know what? I am going to apply to everything that I can while I can in my youth, and be like, screw it. Like if I don't get it, I'll just like make them pretty. And this kind of goes back to, I remember my first time applying for the BMI Composer Award, and I got a rejection letter in the mail, and I'm like, that's a bummer. And especially because like one of my classmates got it, and I was like, maybe my music's not good enough, maybe like my recordings weren't great, everything that like a young 20-something-year-old woman would be fussing about. So I remember my roommate in college, who's a harnist, was also into scrapbooking. This is very much like late 90s, early aughts type of thing. And she's like, do you want to scrapbook this? I was like, I got to make this pretty. And I wish I had my first rejection letter from back then. She gave me like acid-free paper that had like soccer players on it and special glue. And I like scrapbooked, quote unquote, my BMI rejection letter. Okay. So with that in mind, as a 29-year-old, I'm like, I'm going to blog. And part of the reason why I blogged is because, like, as a composer, you only have like so many updates to your website. But like, I felt like at the time I had a lot to say. So I thought, posting my rejection letters would be part of what I had to say and part of that process. And so I called them composer fails. I think like me and a composer friend of mine, Neb, would just like joke if something went wrong in grad school, would be like fail. So hence the capitalization of the word fail. And so I just started cataloging my rejection letters, but also my composer quote unquote wins, because I knew at that point I was actually terrible at winning competitions. Like it's just something I wasn't great at. I was great at finding performers to play my music and supporting them and going to their concerts. And that's actually how I've made it. But what's fascinating is that I got this kind of a following. Like people would be like, oh my goodness, there's this like composer fail blog. And I didn't think I was reaching an audience. I truly thought it was therapy for my graduate student self. Kind of like, who cares? We're in the majority, we're losers. That's fine, whatever. So tongue in cheek would call them fail. I'd add cat pictures to them to make them pretty, or like, here's something cute. And here's my rejection letter. So now that I've been teaching college for full time for the last 7 years, like I actually use it as a pedagogical tool. Like anytime a student comes up to me and there's like, how do I win competitions? I'll be like, first of all, I'm the wrong person to ask, and there's a website proving it. Second of all, it may take you a few tries, and don't feel bad. This is actually part of the process, and this is actually pretty normal. So, and that at this point in my life, I've been very lucky and fortunate, but that's the fail blog. And I literally had a couple people, like random people, talk to me and say like, I love your fail blog. And I had no idea that people had been reading it. It's truly fascinating. But solidarity, you guys, we're all failures.
I got to be honest, I had completely forgotten about it. And then as soon as you said it, I remembered it. I remember laughing.
Yeah, it's been collecting dust. And admittedly, it's just because like I don't apply for as many things anymore as I did when I was 29. Like, I've been a little bit, more savvy, although I got a rejection letter a couple days ago from the American Academy in Rome. So I could post it. But at the same time, I'm like also getting performances. So I don't know if I should keep it up, or maybe I should retire it. I don't know.
Well, it's a good lesson because it takes bucketfuls of failures to find success.
Yes.
And so it's good to see that. So a couple things I want to talk about. You're a member of the Blue Dot Collective. I had Viet Quang on a few weeks ago. And so can you talk about that?
Yes. So I'm a new member of the Blue Dot Collective, but I'm thrilled to join because they're a good group of composers who, like, we all have like a common interest in that we do write band music, but also we kind of see the educational spin about it. And I love that we're a group that supports each other in doing so. So I don't know if I can speak much, but I can say that they did ask me to join probably a couple of weeks before Midwest Clinic. And I said, I thought I should check them out first, like do a little speed dating via Skype and be like, are you guys okay? And I just think we really clicked. And I've known like David Biedebender for years, because he was at Michigan and I was at CCM. We did like the Midwest Composers Symposium conference thing. And so I was familiar with them, and I was familiar with Viet Quang and Roger Zare. I've also known for a few years. And I just met the other guys, and just a group of great people. And just, I feel very at home, especially with a whole bunch of composers that have had experience in writing wind ensemble music and understand that culture and being able to support each other. I think that has been really great.
Mm-hmm. And one of the questions, I don't ask it much anymore, and it's probably because of the way the show has evolved over time. Or maybe I'm just better at getting questions and asking questions. But I used to ask every composer about self-publishing and commercial publishing. And I know that you're self-published and that you have your music, you're selling your music through Murphy Music Press.
Yes.
Just maybe briefly touch on that?
Yeah, actually, I'll also add that I'm part of another composer collective too, Adjective New Music, which is, I think, more encompassing with what we do. And I think they're not as focused like with band music per se, like Blue Dot Collective, but they've been doing a distribution wing too. So I have my music distributed by them too. But this is relevant in your question in that I've had many conversations with my friend Andrew Smith, who's one of the co-founders of Adjective Collective. And we were talking specifically about copyright and also like how publishing supports or does not support young composers. So the long story short is one thing I like about self-publishing is that I get to keep my own copyright. Like I can decide or sign a contract if like Adjective wants to distribute Murphy, and like those have been really fantastic. And admittedly, I've only been with Murphy since December, but they are great. Sean is great. But at the same time, I could print out my own pieces of music, or if it's like, if I know of a student, who, they're broke, right? Like I was at TMEA last weekend, and there's a group of clarinetists and they really wanted clarinet choir music. So I'm going to email this woman and be like, here's a free copy, but, like get your friends to pay for me. You know what I mean? Just like the idea, I think the reason why we do what we do is to have like music creation. That being said, we do need to eat sometimes. So there's that, having control of the copyright, but also like with regards to royalties, and you think about different ways in which composers get paid. And I think being able to have control over that, not only getting like half of your royalties from BMI, but like all of your royalties from BMI, or like the 200% share, I think is really imperative for a young or emerging composer to have, in which it's like, look, you have a craft, you write music, that is your trade, and you should get paid for that, especially if you have a performance. So the long story short is I actually strongly discourage young composers from getting a publisher unless it's like, I don't know, and a publisher approaches them. Do you know what I mean? I'm not going to cold call a publisher. And I think distributors are different. And I think distributors are the way to go. Like Murphy Music Press, he's a distributor. And I love the people on his catalog. In fact, one of the reasons why when he approached me to be on his catalog, I looked at who he had on and I saw a diverse group of composers. And I was like, you know what? I want to support that. And I think that's wonderful. And so that's my 2 cents of just maintaining your copyright, and try to, I hate being capitalistic about it, but try to earn as much as you can as a young composer, because, you want as much financial support as possible in that way.
All right, Jennifer, where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
Goodness, I don't know if there's like a line, but I think healthy competition is good. Unhealthy, taking people down and even like stressing yourself out and being healthy to your being is not good.
Right. Did you have much competition growing up as a pianist? It's sort of sort of an inner competition, I imagine.
I think it's more inner. I don't know, maybe it's because it's like my upbringing, like having a Korean mother, there was more of that competition like put on me. But at the same time, maybe I was just like, well, whatever, like I know how good I am. So maybe that's why I'm not like super crazy competitive, but friendly competition I think is great.
All right. How do you achieve work-life balance?
So that is an elusive question, but I've learned to have boundaries in my life, and that it's okay to say no, or even better, you can say yes, but later. But get back to me on that one in a few years. Let's see where I stand.
Yeah, there's very few people who seem to have an answer to that. It's everyone sort of wrestles with the idea of how to do that.
Yeah, and I would say also listening to your inner voice. If something is wrong or you feel like something's not right, to really just take the time and take care of yourself. I would say recently, I'm not hiding this, like I decided to finally go on an anti-anxiety med because I just wasn't feeling right in the last couple months. And at first I was like, I used to handle the stress before, I don't know. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to try it. And it's been interesting. I'm not up to the 6-week point yet, but I would just be like, I would just be like, sorry about this. I had somebody just open my door right now. It was a little distracting. I'll start again. I will say that if there's something that you feel is not right or something that's unhealthy to you, I would just say really take the time and honor that. And there is really no shame in getting help in whatever way possible. And I'm learning that, and I'm trying to live true to that.
Jennifer, this is something we don't talk about on this podcast much, but Kate Nishimura, the composer, brought this up too. And there's sort of a stigma about anxiety and medication and seeing therapy for musicians. We don't really talk about it, but you just brought it up. Is it something you'd be willing to share more of?
Absolutely. I would say that I had a therapist in Ohio, went through kind of a big life change, and also dealing with like work and like being an academic. That was very stressful, and it was really good to have a therapist. And the long story short with that was she ended up moving to Arizona. I ended up moving to Texas. So it might be time to find another one. But I knew that as of late, the last couple of months, I've felt physically not great. Maybe in hindsight, that was like an anxiety attack. And again, I think I just kept convincing myself that I just didn't need it. Like, I didn't, like, compared to friends of mine and students of mine who do have mental illness. Like, I was like, I'm not severely like depressed. I would know those signs, or I felt like kind of listening to like my tiny like physical manifestations of my stress and anxiousness was like little compared to them. So it's like, why worry about myself? Like, they're the ones that really like need help, and I encourage them to go have help. But what I'm doing is minor. And even though I felt miserable and like I would have these like attacks where my heart rate was like racing, I was just trying to convince myself that I didn't need it, that I wasn't important to myself to take care of myself, and that what I was experiencing was very real, and there was nothing wrong with it, and that maybe I should talk to someone about it. And so when I went to, I had a physical because I'm new to the area, and I had to establish a primary healthcare physician. I think one of the questions came up, and I said, I've been very stressed. And I said, yes, I'm an academic. Yes, I'm a composer. And yes, like when we get more gigs, that's more stressful, but it's cool stressful, but, well, not cool stressful, but you get what I'm saying. It's like, well, you have to do more for your thing. Okay. So she's like, do you want medication for that? I'm like, no, I'm fine. And then like, I came up with a line, like, I was like, I don't want it to affect my creativity. You know what I mean? Because like, that's a fear. I remember reading, Eat, Pray, Love, like years ago. And that was the first thing, this woman is talking about how she's going through a divorce. And she's like, here are 3 books I wrote. I don't want to affect my creativity. And like, how substantiated is that? But that's what I told her. And I remember like, even in the doctor's appointment, just seeing my reflexes work and everything. Like, I was just like, actually, you asked if I needed medication, like maybe ? Because I was timid about it, because I initially said no, because I was like, why would I need this? Like, what I go through is so minor. It is not a problem. Like, I can handle this. I'm a hardworking old millennial. Like, I totally got this. I've gotten this in the past. And then she's like, okay. Well, and then she started asking me questions and was actually to the point. And then she gave me like a little questionnaire just to quantify how stressed I was. And then I remember she took the paper from my hand. She's like, yeah, this is bad. This is serious. So we got started, but it's just not honoring or thinking it was like no big of a deal. Like, and I don't know if this is just like my upbringing as a girl or woman, just being like, oh, I'm not as important. Other people have it worse. Like, I don't need drugs. It might affect my creativity. Like, every single excuse in the book, I swear, that prevented me from all these years. And like, now that I'm starting this medication, and I think I'm 4 weeks in, I was like, oh, it was bad. And I just think that a lot of pressures of like having my job and my generation, like, we are expected to do so much. And I just don't think we've evolved to the point where we can like mentally handle it all. So I would just encourage everyone, all of your listeners out there, where it's like, if you feel like something's wrong, or even just a little bit, just at least talk to somebody about it. And, one thing that I've noticed, I actually kind of outed myself on Twitter, and I don't even see this as outing it, because it's like, look, no, we need to talk about this. We need to normalize this, right? It's like all my composer friends are on some kind of SSRI, and they've been super supportive. And I got like text messages and said, you let me know if you need to talk about this, if your body's adjusting to it. I can tell you how this worked out for me. Like, and that it's not a cure-all at all. I mean, it's supposed to help manage your day-to-day. And so, yeah, I mean, again, all the excuses went through my head. So I'm glad I've started doing this. It is still an adjustment, but it's something that's very real. And there are a lot of people out there that will support you. A lot of people are going through the same thing.
Because it's close to the home here. So my daughter in November was, and so I don't know if you want to hear about my kids, but this is pertinent. She came home crying one day, and it turns out that we got a phone call from her teacher. Sophie acted out today. Mm-hmm. And then in the course of like 2 or 3 weeks, it went from acting out once to sitting in the principal's office, refusing to go to class and doing work all day in the principal's office.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I feel that.
And she wouldn't bend. And we brought her to the pediatrician, who is a specialist in childhood anxiety. And she's like, your kid, she's just crippled with anxiety.
No, it's okay. I was just like now I feel like I can feel that because okay, so basically the reason why I tweeted about day 1 on anti-anxiety meds, I was like, it was a bad day. It was a bad day. And this is stuff that I've heard friends talk about. This is stuff that I've read about. And let me tell you, it was hard. It was so hard to put my clothes on, like my professor garb. It was so hard. And I was like, the logic. So I pride myself in being a logical person, but I remember my brain saying, like, you can't teach your class today. This is not a good day. This is it almost felt painful. Again, I will emphasize the physical manifestation of anxiousness. And I remember going all right, well, I'm glad I'm on the meds. Obviously, they're not going to work in day 1. They work around week 6. And I was like, maybe I waited too long. This is bad. I've never experienced anything to that intense degree. So I tweeted, I said, day 1, and it's not a good day. And yes, I ate a whole sleeve of Girl Scout Thin Mint cookies. But you know what? I did it like a champ. And I ate those cookies, and I didn't even have salad to add to my calorie count. I just downed those cookies, and I'm just going to cookie it up. And some people tweeted in response. I said, look, I'm literally on the bus right now. I'm on my way to work. I don't feel great. It was cold because Texas Panhandle, whatnot. And I was like, I've just got to push through it. But I just remember that was a struggle. And again, there's even still part of me right now that feels like, how can you say that's a struggle? You need to go to work. What is wrong with you? And I'm like, you know what? There is something wrong with me, but whatever. And I will acknowledge how I'm feeling, and that is real. And I shouldn't deny myself my voice or how I'm feeling. That's just how it is. That is just how it is.
Well, it's very empowering to hear you say that, because one of the results of my daughter's deal is that my wife and I began examining ourselves. And I, through most of my life, have I have a terrible imposter syndrome. Oh my goodness. I have to write a piece right now, and I'm starting it, and I just feel like I get paralyzed. Paralyzed. Of course I do.
But I feel you.
Of course I do. But it's as I watch my daughter struggle with her anxiety, I look at myself and I say, do I need to look at this? Is this something I need to look at?
I think you'll know when you know. Like I said, I think I maybe waited too late, but better late than never. I'm it's a process. My body's still adjusting, but I want to talk about it because the people are there to talk to you about it. And I wish I started this earlier, but I didn't know. You know what I mean? Because it's what's wrong with you? How hard is it to go to work? Well, sometimes it's really difficult, painfully difficult to go to work and teach my class. Yeah.
And so, Jennifer, what are the challenges facing music education, or maybe music in general, and how can we best meet them?
Okay, off the top of my head, I would say I wouldn't call it a problem. I think it's potential strength, or strength and training, as my colleague Sarah McCoyne says. I think what would be lovely in music education is having kind of like an exposure to different types of voices. So I've been thinking a lot about this of like diversity in music and like women in music. And I was also thinking with like some of my experiences as a woman, and I don't mean to boil it down, but sometimes I wonder if there are these societal mores that kind of like don't take women's voices as seriously, don't take people of color's voices as seriously. And I was thinking like music is one of my voices, right? And there are different ways of expressing ourselves and different ways of having our voices. And I think what would be great is we could figure out a way and make it easy for like middle school and high school teachers to kind of diversify the repertoire. I know that's going to take a very long time. I know it's going to take a lot of effort, but if we all come from this place where we can do better and we can find something that would relate to these children, I think it would just be very helpful. And it's actually, as a side note, why I still write pedagogical music, although this last piece, it was a little bit of a struggle, and I'm like, I have to take a year off, but although I'm going to be writing another one with the Blue Dot Collective, so I guess I can't say no to that, but I feel like it's kind of like my service to my profession, where it's like I don't mention anything or say anything, but somebody named Jen Jolley just wrote this piece of music, and this is what she looks like. And maybe you look like this person, or maybe you too don't like practicing the piano and you just add notes to things. And that could be whatever. That could be like, maybe there's a boy who's super like really bored at practicing the piano, does the same thing. But, like giving them an opportunity to find somebody to like, see like I have a voice that's similar, or like maybe we have a similar background, or like Southern Californian kids, that have Asian moms, like maybe they might relate to my music or something like that. But just to give them different opportunities to hear different points of view, I think would be great. And I don't see this as a problem. I think it's something we can all do together, and we would have a great music education.
All right, Jennifer, you have a time machine and you can travel back to your high school graduation. What advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
So I've thought a lot about this, like what I tell myself as a young composer, and I basically just to really have confidence in myself, like or herself. I think that was one thing I wish I had more of, that my instincts were good, and to not feel self-conscious and just be like, hey, look, no one died over this. And that's hard for like a teenager / early 20-somethings to hear. Like, your brain is literally in different stage of development. But I would say like, trust your instincts, probably score study a little bit more. Probably wish I did more of that. But also just, you got this, you're a good composer, you have good ideas, and trust them.
All right, if you could plan it out, what would be the final work by someone else, some piece of music that's inspired you, that you'd conduct or hear or listen or engage with?
So 3 pieces come to my mind. That's probably cheating. I can narrow it down to 1 piece. I could. Although as a composer, it's not a new piece of music. I would say the Bach double concerto for 2 violins. And I actually did a bit of research on this piece, because I have this violin duo that I wrote. But I think it's well constructed, it's beautiful, and like both violins are kind of like equal in their nature. That would be one of them. Yeah, I keep changing my mind on this. I love Steve Reich's music for 18 musicians. And also my friend Andrew Norman wrote a piece called Play, and I kind of wish I wrote that piece. Actually, I wish I wrote that piece. I would love to hear that live. And if I were a conductor, I would love to work with it for sure.
How about if you had to give one piece of yours for my listeners to listen to know you, what would that be?
So I have a piece that it has been having its consortium premiere, and I kind of want everybody to listen to this. It's called Ash, and it will be available for performance in November of this year. But I don't have a recording yet. So unfortunately, no, we can't do that one. So,
you can soon.
Yes. Then let's pick that piece.
Yeah, the score's available too. People,
yes,
we're musicians. We got this.
Yeah, absolutely. I felt really good writing this piece, and I just think it clicks well, and I feel like it's really what I'm feeling in my emotion on the page and in the piece. So I would say once the recording's up, if everyone can go listen to Ash, and you can ask me all the questions.
All right.
That's fine.
Awesome. So this will be released in the middle of March. And so Is there anything coming up that you'd like to share or promote?
The middle of March. Let me look at my calendar. Yeah, because my thing at Ohio State is at the beginning of March. So let's look at mid-March. Yes, it's not a band thing. Is that okay? Nope, I don't know if that's in the middle of March. I have a performance on March 9th in New York City, but this is, okay, it'll be past. Yes, I know exactly what it is. I will be the guest composer at the Composers Festival of Hartford, or the Women's Composer Festival at Hartford at the end of March. I would say it's March 29th and 30th. And speaking of composer anxiety, I really need to finish that piece. It'll be great and fabulous. It really will be, guys. I just bought finger cymbals from TMEA, so that'll be great. It'll be done by then. Everything will be like puppy dogs and unicorns and kittens. So, all
right. Jennifer, how can people get in touch with you?
Sure. You could go to my website at www.jenniferjolley.com. And I think I'm easy to find on Instagram under Y Compose and Twitter and Facebook.
Jennifer, thanks so much for your time. You're really engaging and entertaining to talk to. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Mark. This has been great.